everybody. So I thought that it might be a fun idea for me to pop on and talk about my method of animating parallax backgrounds, or in other words, the kind of backgrounds that look like they're moving along with the camera. I'm going to be using my part from the map Home, which I animated about 6 years ago, but I still use all of these same methods today. I think that this animation shows the parallax effect pretty clearly because there's a bunch of different fence posts that are all aligned in a line going into the distance. I'm using After Effects here, but I'm going to try to keep it pretty general since I know that not everybody is using the same programs. But I think that most programs do have some kind of graphing functionality hidden around there somewhere if you can look around for it. In After Effects, it's just this button right here. And you may have to adjust the size a little bit in order to see it better, but that's where it is in After Effects. And basically, all it does is it shows how many pixels a given layer is moving along the duration of the animation. So for example, this animation is about 60 frames, and then I have about 6 different background layers that are all animating across the screen here. And again, there's no actual camera animation happening in this shot. It's all just images of the various layers of background that are all translating across the screen, as you can see, like this kind of thing. So the graph is just showing the starting points and ending points of each layer. So the lower the line is in the screen, the further to one side it is. And then as the line goes up, the layers move further across the screen until their final ending point. The layers that I have in this shot are the foreground, the run ground, which I named that because that's the layer that Squirrel Flight is running on. Then I have the midground and the background, along with some extra posts that I've named Tiny Post and Wee Post for some reason. And then after that I have the mountains layer, which is the size of the screen because it's not moving at all. And as you can see, the layers start pretty long and then get gradually shorter, and that's because they're going to be moving at different speeds. Now if you look back at the graph, you can see that the foreground layer is translating a lot further across the screen than the background layer, and you can tell that by the slope of the line. The steeper the slope, the faster the layer is going to be moving. And you can also see that visually by looking up here at where the layers are on the screen. If you go back to the beginning and then watch this tiny fence post and compare it to where this rock is that's on a closer layer, if you only go a couple of frames, you can see that even though they started in roughly the same place, the rock is now a lot further along than the tiny fence post is. Basically, the closer to the camera that a layer is, it will be longer and faster. Closer things are just zooming by, while things that are further away stay relatively in the same place. And it doesn't really matter where the starting point and ending point of each layer exactly is, as long as it follows this general shape of the graph. Now, if one of your layers is moving much more out of sync than the others, then that's where you might see the motion looking a little bit off, but it's easy to fix if you know the general principle. A good starting point is picking a spot that you know you want your drawings to line up. For me in this animation it's frame number 46. As you can see, I have a key on every layer here. And that's because this is the spot where all of the fence posts line up and are on top of each other in a row. And it's also the impact point of when Squirrel Flight hits the fence. I did this partly because it looks nice with the framing of the shot, but also because I wanted to kind of hide the impact point of when Squirrel Flight hits the fence. So that way I could avoid having to line up the wires exactly perfectly with Squirrel Flight's animation. And you don't have to pick the middle of the animation to line up. It's perfectly fine to just have them line up at the beginning. And then when you get to the end, you can just adjust the positions of the layers so that they line up nicely in the way that you want the final frame to be looking. What I usually do is I animate the background using a very basic sketch first, because there's nothing worse than fully rendering your background only to realize that it needed to be 500 pixels longer. Having a very basic sketch makes it easy to just really quickly move an object or make one layer a little bit longer and just see how it works without having to redraw the entire thing every time. Then it's easy enough to just replace the PNG files with finished backgrounds without changing any of the animation. A lot of this will depend on what things your specific animation calls for, but I think that knowing the general principles will definitely give you a good starting point for figuring out how you want your backgrounds to move in your animation. I'm thinking about making some more of these explainer or tutorial videos. If you enjoyed it, feel free to comment on some suggestions of what you might like me to explain next, whether it's something that I did in one of my map parts, or maybe a general animation principle that you might want to get my take on. I'm thinking things like maybe my method of lip syncing, or in-betweening, or follow-through, or stuff like that. I know that I'm a very technical animator, so I hope that things weren't too mathy, or if they were too complicated, or maybe too simple for some, but let me know.